because our body, mind, spirits are all connected, so often there is diseases of spiritual origin that also need us to help them move with physical healing. And physical healing requires us to change our diet. It just end of story. If people are living on processed foods and lots of sugar and energy drinks and caffeine and pouring alcohol on top of that every other night, it's not going to happen. They have to go hand in hand. And sometimes one starts before the other. There has to sort of be a leapfrogging where one's changing. As we sort of upgrade and, unlock these new parts of us, then we get to take lessons from the last phase and apply it to this new one.
Welcome to the Inner Child Podcast. Now with 2 million downloads, I help high achievers recover from painful relationships and childhood trauma. Let's heal together on Season 2 of the Inner Child Podcast. Welcome back to the Inner Child Podcast. It is me, your host, Gloria Zhang. I'm a therapist and author, relationship coach. But today we have a very, very special guest, and I'm super excited to introduce her to today's episode. I thought this would be a perfect interview for Season 2. And today you're going to meet Raina. Now, Raina is someone I actually originally met because she was part of our soulmate program. She is a holistic practitioner herself, and I was very fascinated with the interesting work that she does, not just with food and nutrition, but also with spirituality and shamanic healing, which is such an interesting combination. It's not something I've heard of quite before. And I was actually on her podcast a couple of weeks ago, and I'm so excited to finally bring her here to talk about her work, but also the role that spirituality and shamanic work can play in the healing journey. So please give a warm welcome to Raina. Hello,
Thank you so
Raina.
much. Thank you. Gloria, thank you. This is so exciting. And I'm so honored to be here. You helped so many people. And I originally found you through your podcast. And I am flabbergasted that I am now on your podcast. It was so helpful to me when I found it. The work that I do is a really interesting combo, kind of an enigma in that I've really blended a lot of different modalities. And I have this sort of funny, joking terminology that I'm a Swiss Army knife of wellness. But all of my wellness friends we all have so many skills, and you just keep being able to meld them together and blend them together and, pick and choose out of your belt what's going to work for the person in front of you that day. And that can change from session to session as well. So I do have a background in holistic nutrition. I studied at the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition back in 2010, received my diploma there, was living in Kitsilano at the time. And I loved learning about what food can do for me, all of the marketing that we were sort of fooled around, and what a whole foods diet looks like. That was a game changer for me health-wise, and it also set me on the path to where I am now doing spiritual work. That time in my life when that felt really like a calling. But now I know that it was just a breadcrumb to get me to doing this work, because I didn't quite understand back then about what it meant to be connected to the land this deeply. I knew that there was something there, but I didn't know the depth of it yet. And there was no way to know when you're 21. There's no way to understand that fully. But it was really special because when I was studying in that program, the teacher that I had in my body, mind, spirit program, she was a shamanic teacher. And on our last day of class, she said, "I'm going to see you again in the future." And I was like, well, probably not. I'm going to go back to the Okanagan and I'll start my practice there. And she kind of had this little glimmer in her eye. And I didn't understand what it meant at the time. But 8 years later, I had my sickness, called sickness, when you have your abilities awakened within you. It's really dark. It's a dark night of the soul. It's really, really messy and super beautiful and terrifying all at the same time. And so I called her up and I was like, I'm not well. I need to come see you. And she's like, why did it take you so long? I've been waiting for you. So that's when I started on my like more formal path of training in shamanic medicine and really understanding what it looked like to live a life with the lens of animism, which is understanding that there's medicine and we assign that soul or an essence of being to things around us, but also things in nature. And we learn to work with them in a way where we honor that essence. My work is so different every day. It keeps me on my toes. It's never the same thing twice.
That's beautiful, Raina. I want to go back to what you said about being connected to the land. So I don't know if I shared this with you on your podcast, but as you know, I'm originally from big city Toronto. It's very busy, very polluted, and quite dirty these days. But as soon as we landed here in BC, I felt like the energy of this place was so different. And it really is a different vibe here, being surrounded by ocean and mountains and all these trees. And I feel physically different just from being here versus even a few weeks ago, I went back to visit for a couple of weeks, and then just this heaviness of being in the city. And so this concept of being connected to the land feels more real for me this year than ever, just from the move. And I hear a lot of people talking about how we are so disconnected from the earth and from the land. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that and how that has to do with all of this healing work that we do for our audience.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And feeling what it's like to be in different places is really powerful. It gives us sort of a radar to learn where we feel good. It's really just an extension of our intuition, right? Our innate wisdom of how am I feeling right now? And we have a built-in, guidance. Well, say you're walking in the woods and you're alone and you get this feeling, turn around, turn around. You should turn around. There might be a bear around the next corner, right? And so we have this like built-in compass. And I think, especially once people do their inner child healing with you through your program, then they really get to understand that on a deeper and safer level. And then that can sort of turn on, reactivate, or strengthen this innate ability that we have to connect with the land that we're on. And so it sort of heightens our internal guidance system where we get to learn, where do I feel good? And how come when I'm at that place on that space, that doesn't feel as good for me? And so in that way, we'll start walking through our world differently because we start being able to have more questions like, why am I feeling that way? And where is this coming from, right? And we really do get the opportunity to start coming from a place or using different lenses of viewing our life. And I think that's a huge part of shamanic medicine, is being able to ask questions and do that internal guidance, that check-in. We have really fallen so far away from our connection to nature, and even the word God like scares people. So I like to say God, creator, source, universe, whatever you want to call it. It's so great. I had a conversation with one of my friends last week, and she's Christian, and we were talking about, I was sharing stories with her about being in ceremony. And then I said, does this make you uncomfortable? And she said, no, I think it's great because you use the word creator and I use the word God, but we both have a connection to a higher power, and we both understand what community looks like. That was the origins of like what religion is supposed to be. And I was like, oh, wow. So we're on the same page then. Yeah. This is beautiful to be able to meet in that space. Right. And so it's that returning to tradition that we're really so far away from. And we were really pushed away from that. We don't understand what real food looks like. We don't understand how we can heal ourselves. And there's so many opportunities for increasing that disconnection. We have TV, we have, phones that we can stare at 24/7 and it doesn't end. Like we constantly entertain the depths of entertainment that's available to us. And, drugs and alcohol everywhere. And so there's just so many opportunities to dissociate and continue to be far away from nature. And so when people have a moment where they are able to disclose to someone about what bad thing happened to them, and they sort of have that first opening of being vulnerable and being able to share with someone, and that's when their healing journey can begin. That's the moment where they start making their way back to nature and back to the land and back to God, creator, source. It's like this breadcrumb journey along the way where you're like, this was all here waiting for me all along.
Yes.
I just couldn't see it. I was too bogged down with my trauma and my drama and society. Like it's set up to keep you away from all that. But it is all sitting there waiting to support you.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I have goosebumps hearing that, Raina. And the way that you describe it, I see how it's all connected, right? Like the food comes from the earth, but also in both of our work, when people are suffering, the first thing they always say is, I feel so disconnected, right? It's such a common phrase that we hear. I feel disconnected. I feel broken. I was actually talking to my partner the other day about how we all live inside like boxes, right? And it's almost like the home itself creates a separation between us and outside. And it's almost as if we're separate from outside, but we're actually from it. We're actually part of it. And it's such a bizarre human concept. I would love to hear some more of your thoughts about the role of nutrition, but also spirituality as part of the human healing journey.
Okay, yes. So, first of all, yeah, everyone's sitting in their little boxes, living their lives. I think about stuff like that all the time. And it's such a curse. But when you see it, you can't unsee it, right? So it just kind of becomes this cosmic joke that you can see in others. And then when you're living it, you're mostly just in it and you don't see it.
Right.
So being able to step out and see it is good. I feel that because our body, mind, spirits are all connected, so often there is diseases of spiritual origin that also need us to help them move with physical healing. And physical healing requires us to change our diet. It just end of story. If people are living on processed foods and lots of sugar and energy drinks and caffeine and pouring alcohol on top of that every other night, it's not going to happen. They have to go hand in hand. And sometimes one starts before the other. There has to sort of be a leapfrogging where one's changing, one's changing, one's changing. As we sort of upgrade and, unlock these new parts of us, then we get to take lessons from the last phase and apply it to this new one. So, one of the things that I help people with the most, and which I have a program on, is helping with emotional eating. And it's so interesting because when I first started seeing that more in my practice, and, people were saying, you're not just a nutritionist, it's because I was helping them with the intuitive and spiritual stuff too. It was like really just trying to help people be present, because food was working as a distraction and working as a numbing agent. And so then that's, that's when I realized, crap, I'm not just doing nutrition stuff. Like I'm doing addictions work now. It's really hard for people. It's really big. It's really scary. It takes a while. Once people realize that they're participating in emotional eating, then it still takes them a while to act on healing that, because it's so big. I feel that because all of our energy body and our physical body, because they're so deeply intertwined and they work together, that when we start making changes in our diet and eating closer to nature, visiting the farmers markets, getting to know people in our neighborhood who are growing or selling food, once we start participating that way and start getting more fresh food into our body, there's no way that it's not going to affect our emotional and mental states, because cellularly we are changing ourselves. And, it's like, I hate that I'm about to say this, but when people say you are what you eat, it's like literally, yes.
Yeah, you kind of are.
Literally. And so it's so powerful. My disclaimer in it is not to be so far into eating clean that you then have a disordered eating around needing to eat perfect all the time, because that's the trap we can fall into, which is essentially the same as over here where we're obsessed, but now we're just obsessed in a different way. And I've seen that with people as well. And of course, I've gone through that. When you're in nutrition school, you eat perfect every day. Actually, I was very lucky because the month after I got out of nutrition school and came back here, I met with a woman who eventually became my mentor for a while. And she was like, let's sit down for coffee. And she took me out and we sat down and had a brownie. And I was like shocked. I'm like, why are we eating a brownie? But it was her way of saying, you're in the real world now. You're not in nutrition school anymore. And we're going to have this sugar dessert together, right? So funny. But it was a good lesson for me also, even when food isn't healthy, if eaten in a relaxed state with people that care about you and healthy conversation, it doesn't matter what it is. You can actually get more nutrition from it than if you were to eat a really healthy salad, but you're super stressed and angry. And so the way that our digestive system works with that is if we're too stressed, it just shuts down. Learning to harness and work with our nervous system, part of what you teach as well, is being able to change your relationship with food, because then you can have those treats and those processed foods, but you're like, I'm calm about it and I'm enjoying myself and I'm chewing. And that shifting the energy of it shifts the energy of the entire experience of it, from how it's being eaten to how your body receives it. Not power over other people, but personal power to reclaim when we start, applying these different modes of seeing into our life. And, like diet culture, it's a trap that people get caught in. And, like I'm sure that you see with your clients where you're like, oh, but if they could just get out of this for 1 second, they could see how much easier their life could be. It's the same with dieting. It's like, oh, if they could just let that go for 1 second and just be able to have that experience of what the freedom they could have without that might feel like and look like, they would take advantage. But it doesn't work that way. You have to do the work to be able to get a sampling of it. Then once you get a sampling, you're like, oh, okay. And then it's the unraveling and all the layers within it. And a grieving process too. Same as how we did in your program. You have to grieve the years that you gave away to diet culture. Like grieving is always a part of our healing process. So very messy. Wow. Messy and beautiful.
So beautiful. And I think that even the fact that the messiness is where it happens is the point, right?
Yeah.
It's just everything you've just said. It's not always about finding the exact correct ingredient and the exact correct food type, but it's the entire experience, right? Of who you're having that food with, the intention you're setting when you're taking this substance into your body. To me, that just perfectly summarizes what holistic really means. It's so countercultural to probably Western thinking, where we try to dilute everything, right? And, we'll take a plant and we'll separate it into its active and inactive parts, and then find that it's not as effective as just ingesting the whole thing. And there's so much about separating things or breaking it into parts. But what you're saying is it's the whole thing. It's not as simple as just 1, 2, 3. You have to consider your body, your mind, and your spirit. I think that's so beautiful. I just had a little aha moment here, Raina, if I am to share this.
Oh, please.
I know that they've done so many studies trying to figure out the perfect healthy diet, right? And then they look at European countries where they're drinking wine and bread, but they eat in such a celebratory way, right? With family and surrounded with friends. And they have way longer lifespans than we do over here. And it's just the irony of trying to identify and narrow things down.
Again, it comes down to that holistic lens, right? Because yes, they're eating celebratory and they're more joyful about food because their culture is very focused, food forward. And it's that. However, also their food is grown differently. Their soil is different. They have different
That's right.
practices than we do, right? So there's better relationships with local farmers. Like it's part of your family's culture to go get fresh every day or every other day.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas here, we'll have to, drive to the grocery store, load up for a
Mm,
week, and there's
right.
no connection with where it's actually coming from. And I just did a podcast with one of my permaculture friends in Switzerland, and we talked about eating seasonally and what that looks like. And I think that is one of the most powerful tools that I could share with your audience is to find one food that's grown locally that you can just find someone who grows it. And something that I was really, really promoting in 2020 was, do you have farmers on speed dial? Like, get to know these people. There was like a lot of like prepping and stuff happening at that time. And it was like, just know some farmers. We don't have to panic, but community is really important. And so getting to know the people that are growing your food is really special. And so it's very different from going to a huge buck store and grabbing greens from California. That is very different. Still greens, still good for you, but very different energetically from going to the farmer's market or meeting a farmer and buying stuff from the back of his pickup at like a gas station, like I've done. It feels very badass. And then eating his food that was just picked like yesterday. And you can feel in your body that they're different. Even if they're the same veggie, you can feel that they're different. And that has so many layers in it of the soil, the person picking it, and how it gets to you, and then your state of mind when you're having it, because we do tend to energetically elevate local food, because if it's pricier or if it was harder for us to get, then it has a higher value in our mind, right? It feels much more special, but it also fuels our cells in a different way. So like I have foraging friends, and when I eat their food, my body feels really happy. It feels happy when I eat veggies from the grocery store.
Yeah.
It feels happy, but it doesn't feel like it's doing this. Thank you. It's different. It's different. And it also feels really good to support local farmers. I mean, I try to go out and help a farmer every summer. And after a week, I'm like, I'm dead. I'm done. Put me back on my computer and loop back with my community. And so they work so hard. And so it's really important to support their work as well. And as we do that, even if it's just one food we pick that we can get locally, like eggs, if people eat eggs or a veggie or a fruit, it's a way for us to start being able to tap into some of that power. I'm just going to pull it back to what we talked about earlier, some of that power of the land, and start connecting with food in a different way. We can also find some of the foods that our ancestors ate and bring those into our diets if they're not already, and see how those feel. And that can be a really potent experience for people to, bring in food that their ancestors survived on and have a experience with eating this food. You can have some pretty incredible awakenings, I would say, when you connect with food on that level. There's a lot of stories and power in food and seeds. So there's, like I said at the beginning, there's a lot waiting there for us. Lots of gems along the way.
Oh, that's beautiful, Raina. I see how this is so multifaceted. And at the end of the day, it's about the relationship that we have, right? With literally putting things into our bodies. I think we forget that sometimes. I know in this culture, there's a decline in having actual sit down meals, but we have people eating at their desks. And I mean, I used to do that back when I was, working in person, and that's just become the norm. And I can see the destruction in those relationships, right? Because it's so compartmentalized. And I did want to ask, I know we could talk forever. I'd love to hear more about your journey with inner child healing and how this has supplemented your work and in what you do.
That was such a special time for me. And it definitely was an initiation for me to go through your program because, I really, and this is another part of medicine work, other than trauma healing, is the initiations and rites of passages that have been lost in our culture as well. And so I had been through a loss, a big loss, right before I took your program. And it was a dark night for me, and also a moment of, I've done so much healing, and why do I still feel like garbage? This doesn't make any sense. It was like, I need to figure this out. And this is something that I have been unwilling or unable to look at until now. But that loss that I had, when something that big happens, you're almost forced to. You know, it's like when people talk about their rock bottom as addicts, it kind of was the same feeling. It was like, this has plagued me for so long. I get the feeling this Gloria girl might be able to help me with it. And I
Did
just
you
have
receive a calling?
it was like, I have a really good feeling from her. And then like a lot of my work in sessions, I do seer work. And so it was like, I'm having visions of myself doing this program. Okay, I guess I need to do this program. And it was a leap for me. I had obviously done lots of programs in the past, but a lot of them I had taken for other people. And this one was for me. It was for me. And that felt really good, because that was, you know, such a theme in the program, was like true self-care. And what does it look like to like hold your inner child, and what does she need? And, you know, these were all like things that previous to taking your program I was pretty uncomfortable with. And I had considered myself someone who had worked through a lot of things that had previously given me discomfort. So it almost annoyed me that I felt that way. And it was like, I feel ready to tackle that. And I felt, because you have such a regulated nervous system, that is like a siren song. That was so much a part of the calling, was like, Gloria feels really, there's something about her. And then I learned what it was, that you were so regulated. And the shamanic teachers that I'd had in my life, they had that too. And I thought, I don't know if I actually have that, or if I'm just good at putting that on, but I want to actually have that, so that people feel like safe and calm and grounded around me. And you had that.
Well, thank
you. That was part of it. It was like, yeah, her. And I think that's such an amazing part of your skill set in what you do, is that you can hold people that way. And in spiritual community as well, there's a lot of like weird competitive stuff around, like, how many ayahuasca ceremonies have you done?
The bypass. We forgot to talk about that. Yeah.
We have so much more we could have got into. Yeah. So much more we could get into. But in that regard, you know, having that sort of competition around that, it's not about that. It's about how you can hold people when they're at their worst. And I think that people can feel that.
Thank you for the kind words, Raina. I didn't know that you felt this calling. That's such an honor for me to hear. And I always believe that whoever we call into the program is who we're meant to work with. And I'm very blessed to have met you, Raina. So I wanted you to know that. But I know we have talked about spiritual ego and this sort of bypassy behavior. Yeah. What would be your definition of spiritual ego or spiritual bypassing for our audience who may not know what that is?
My perspective, how I see it, and the only way I can see this is because I obviously participated in this as well. And I think you have to, in order to go all the way in and then out of it, is when you begin to wear your spirituality as a badge of being better than everyone. And it gets to a place where you're either isolating yourself from others because you're just, you know, judging everyone. I've also seen it very simple, very common, very generic on the level of like love and light, love and light, love and light.
Right.
And it's a way to say, I don't want to have that conversation with you, or I don't want to have that conversation with myself.
Right.
When people are talking about things that make us uncomfortable and we just glaze over and say love and light, it's like you're literally dissociating and saying, I can't deal with that right now. I totally understand people also having burnout and their spirit is like, I don't have the space for your stuff right now. And I totally get that. But again, like me and my friends, like we're very open, like, and we have set respectful boundaries where it's like, if you've got heavy stuff going on, just ask me first. Hey, do you have some space? And the person can say no. And if they say no, like, you can't be mad. Like, that's the rule. And so it gives permission, because even if you don't have space, as soon as someone asks permission, you make it. You make it because you want to support your friend. I think that's the best. Humans love humans, and we just want to support each other. And I think the love and light bypassing puts spirituality as a trend. I totally get it. Like, I participated in that when I was 20 and wearing tie-dye and throwing up peace signs and smoking pot. And I was like, yeah, I'm a super spiritual hippie, right? Like, I totally get it.
Yeah, no,
I totally
me too.
get it.
Me too. Yeah. Especially after the time I did the ayahuasca, and I spoke about it in an earlier episode. I was like, everyone needs to do ayahuasca. And I went through this whole phase. It kind of is a rite of passage, right? But then, yeah, I totally get it.
Yeah. We could do a whole other podcast on psychedelics, but I think, did you just do the one?
It was a one-time experience where I had done 5 ceremonies in a row, which is quite a lot actually for my first time.
Oh my goodness, Gloria.
Yeah. This was an episode like 2 years ago or something. And at this point, it was 9 years ago. Still a great experience, but I had to go through many seasons first to get from there to here.
But you had a foundation of safety in your body. A lot of people don't have that. That's what makes it risky, is people throw themselves into that thinking this will heal me, but they don't have the nervous system grounding.
Yeah.
And that's something that I really promote heavily to people is, if you feel called, do it, but you have to have your nervous system really regulated to be able to ground your spiritual experiences into your body. Yeah, I've met a lot of people who have done lots of ceremony and use the words and say and do the things, but then when something bad happens, they just lose it. And I'm like,
yeah,
I think there's a little bit more to this story, because ayahuasca is not healing everything within you if the smallest things are going to set you off like that, right? Like, that should be telling you something. So yeah,
this is such a juicy conversation.
The power of medicine and poison, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Having a human experience, as you said, it doesn't mean living 100% in the love and the light. That's half of it, right? Of being able to hold joy and love. But then there's also being able to hold the pain and the hard stuff, the tricky emotions. And I think if you go through an experience, for example, with psychedelics, where it does destroy the ego, right? You experience an ego death. I think if there's so much fear around it, your ego will latch on to spirituality as its next ego, right? And I think that's where some of that bypassing can come from. And then it's the same thing disguised as something else. It's so tricky. It's very sneaky.
It is sneaky. And like, I spoke to my teacher a couple weeks ago about psychedelic communities in Vancouver area. She has some more experience in that than me. And it's concerning. There is a lot of harm in those communities. And that's because there are people who find spirituality, psychedelics, trauma healing, they find it from a place of being very broken. But then, like you said, they're just kind of doing the same thing, but with a different flavor. Right. And so they're not really doing the work, and they're perpetuating harm in the communities that are full of people that are trying to do the work. And it's really dicey. It's super interesting. I have said for a long time that I have just been having an underground spiritual community. Like, I don't really do the trendy stuff. I don't participate in like the festivals or anything like that. And I think that is protection for the integrity of the work.
Yes.
And it just kind of has to be that way. And people who find it, and people who come into it and think this isn't for me, then it's not. You're right. It's 100%. If you don't really look or aren't ready, then you can just copy paste and repeat this in a different way and continue to perpetuate harm without knowing, right? I mean, not necessarily. Yeah.
Well, this was a beautiful conversation, Raina. And I love the unexpected ones where it evolves into something Lovely. But alas, I think we're overdue on our time.
That's okay.
And yeah, but I would love people to find you in your work. I adore Raina's Instagram page and the endless wisdom that she puts out. And so, what is the easiest way for the audience to find you?
Thank you so much for having this conversation where we could hold love and light and
Yes,
the darkness.
yes, the non-duality.
Yeah, exactly. It's perfect. My Instagram is at Raina Dawn Lutz, and my website is the same. It's rainadawnlutz.com. So again, I very deeply appreciate you and anyone who's listening who feels that something's like really missing, or that for me it was like something in my gut was just wrong for so long. I had so many different things to try to work around that, but all I had to do was actually look at that, and Gloria helped me to safely do that and to come out the other side a different woman, and I cannot recommend it enough. So again, I'm so honored to be here. Thank you, Gloria.
That means the world to me, Raina. I'm so glad to have met you through this whole process. Just for fun, is there any last notes you would like to leave for our audience?
You know, all of this that we've talked about today, all of it is based around looking at something bigger than yourself. And there's so much potential there that's waiting for you. And you can literally unlock new versions of yourself. It's like a video game. Like, this is so fun. And I just encourage it. I just encourage it so much. You have no idea how much power you have to change your life experience and wake up and say, yeah, I'm going to make some change. And I'm just going to go one step at a time. But you could be living a completely different life within weeks, months, or years of saying that, to say that and say, I'm ready for something bigger than my day to day. There's lots waiting there for you.
Beautiful. So well said. Raina Lutz, everyone. We're going to link all of her accounts on the show notes below. And once again, thank you so much for being here, my love.
Thanks, Gloria.